till I suffocate, very quick to agitate, concentrate till I rate, I'm irate, in a state, my confidence is a trait, success is my motherfucking fate.
Back in the mid-2000s, the world was a drastically different place. We were still playing couch co-op with our PS2s, and the Wii was one of the greatest innovations seen in the industry. Communication wise, if you were lucky enough to be like me as a kid and you had a flip phone or a phone like that, pretty much whatever mobile phones were called before the iPhone, before the term smartphone was the industry standard. In these times, widely popular apps and services like Instagram and Facebook were in their infancy, even MySpace, if any of you remember that. Yes, it was a much less globalized world, a world where keeping in touch with those we don't see on a regular basis was much less common and just generally a more difficult endeavor. During this time, an anime came out that some of you might have heard of called Death Note. Yeah, it's this really indie, underrated show starring a genius student who uses a book to kill people. Crazy, right? Anyway, it was set in the aforementioned mid-2000s, a world we were all familiar with at that time. I mean, look at Light's TV and his computer. However, despite this, I believe that the core function of the Death Note was a metaphor for the eventual dangers of social media. As we all know, from the 2010s to the present day, social media went through a colossal boom and now is absolutely a part of our society whether we like it or not, unfortunately. It's not just about keeping in touch with people you might not otherwise see, it's also about putting parts of yourself onto an online space and continually feeding this social media persona with your data and information. Data which in the previous generation was unavailable publicly. How public is this data now? How easy is it to get a hold of? Well, just like using the Death Note, all you really need to know is a person's face and to write their name into Facebook in order to find information about them. You can find out details like the city they live in, their relationship status, occupation, and where they studied in a matter of seconds, and that's even when the account is private. Although it's not as drastic as the Death Note, since doing so won't kill the person. This is the real world, and a lack of security and posting things online still has its own set of dangers and risks. In the wrong hands, information like this can lead to serious antisocial behaviors like stalking, and generally this information can be used against you. For example, with the recent phenomenon of cancel culture, people attempt to bring up remarks from people's social media accounts and things that might not have aged as well in today's climate. This information can then be used against the subject to create a case or an agenda as to why this person is racist, homophobic, think of anything, any sort of label or insulting sort of thing here. In turn, it has led to a generation of people who pay much more close attention to what they post online in the threat that their information and posts can be used against them. This is comparable at a metaphorical level to how crime rates lower in Death Note, as there is a looming fear that they would be killed for committing any crime, regardless of how petty it was. And just like social media, all one needs is a face and a name to deal with that person. In this context, Kira could be the government, big companies like Facebook who have access to all of our information. And though they claim to be benevolent forces, it has been shown that they've been selling our data and to ad companies for extra revenue. As time goes on, I'd imagine this would become even more severe, especially since we're heading towards a less private, more interconnected world at an extremely rapid pace. So much information can be attained by merely having a concept of someone's appearance and knowing what name they identify with. All in all, it's a very real privacy risk. Kira could be anyone with an agenda against you, because God knows finding you won't be difficult if they know your name and what you look like. I believe that unintentionally and from a thematic perspective, the way the Death Note works draws parallels with social media. Though both have similar requirements to function, both possess dangers as a consequence, despite those of social media being on a much lower scale. And all in all, it kind of seems that to some extent, social media is kind of like the Death Note, because it has all this power with very little effort needed. All you need is a face and a name, right? So in that respect, the Death Note feels maybe like a greater scale to what it has actually become. But yes, in some respects, the actual Death Note itself might be an allegory for social media. So make of that as you will. I've been Solence, and have a great day.
Adrenaline pumping through my veins, now I'm feeling the thrill. Call me Itachi, you won't see me, Tsukuyomi.